Hello, everybody. My name is Nick Oritz, and I just went undefeated at the Pro Play Games TCG Con Case Tournament. We played 7 rounds of Swiss, and then we did a cut to top 16 and top 8, and we decided to split top 4. But I didn't drop a match during those times playing Sky Striker. With Engage at 1 now, you're able to not only gain a bunch of advantage that you previously weren't able to with the Engage ban, but now you have quick access to OTK people, you're more consistent, you're able to set up more defensive boards, and the deck is just overall so much better than it was. So this is a blind second variant. I still think you need to go second with this deck, even with 1 engage, because the starter count in this deck is pretty low. There's about 8 starters in the deck that are like ways to get to Ray, and you need about 11 to 14 in a deck for it to be considered like really consistent and viable. So you really need that 6th card a lot of the times. So I built the deck geared to go second. So without further ado, start the profile. You got 3 Ray and 2 Rose as the Sky Striker cards. So this card is kind of like a worse Hornet Drones in a lot of cases, but at the end of the day, it's a Sky Striker name, and it has its own little uses to it. If it's in the graveyard, it can make Afterburner essentially an extender to get another Sky Striker name back into the grave. It is a pseudo Eagle Booster by being able to chain block Kagari by going like Chainlink 1 Kagari, Chainlink 2 Rose. Your opponent can't Bell you, they can't Appo you, they can't Borla Savage Dragon you, to basically ensure that your Kagari resolves, and you can make a Zeke right away to bait out another negate. So this card has really good practical uses, and I feel like 2 is a good number. 1, because this deck plays Pot of Desire, so you don't really want to banish your only copy. And then 2, you just want to have that 8 to 9 starter range in your deck. And going second and playing the best going second card in the game right now, Dinosaur Prankertops. So 1 of, so I mean, if you see it, it's really good. Bait 2 interruptions on its own. It's 2600 attack. It's insane. So I recommend playing this. So because we are playing a go in second deck, you want to stop your opponent as best as you possibly can. So I'm playing 13 hand traps. So when you're blind seconding, the only deck that you really need to open 2 hand traps against is a deck like Drytron. And playing 13 hand traps, you have about like a 55% chance to see 2 and like an 85% chance to see at least 1. So I wanted to play as much as possible to open as many as I possibly can against that deck. And then against a deck that's slower or about as fast as you really only need 1 hand trap to break the board. I feel like these are the 4 best hand traps in the game right now. Veiler and Imperm's really good against Drytron. Ash is generically good to hit Shaddoll Fusion. And Nibiru hits everything that's not the mirror. And if you can play the mirror correctly, even the Nib, if you open it, is still okay. And just the 1 Bell, it's the 13th hand trap. Well, I think Crow and Meister have better targeted matchups. I feel like Bell is just the most generically good out of everything and hits the most out of every single deck, so I decided to play that. That's it for the monsters. So 16 monsters and 3 traps. Onto the spells. 1 engage. Now only limited to 1. It's real good to have this bag. I don't really need to go into that. 1 multi-roll. This card is about as good as there are many engage copies that are legal in the game. So previously, when this was banned, multi-roll wasn't very good. It was subpar because you didn't really want to dump it with Hayate and add it with Kagari. You didn't really want to search it off Shizuku. But now that Engage is legal, being able to search this card off Engage is really good, and it helps get a lot of defensive plays before you end your turn. And the last one of is Hornet Drones, just like the last form of Ray in your deck. 2 Afterburner and 2 Area Zero. I feel 2 Area Zero is a lot better now that Engage is back, because you're essentially playing double the amount of multi-rolls for this to trigger. So I don't feel like 3 of this is unnecessary, so 2 is the perfect amount. You're playing 18 striker cards, so you're going to be able to usually see it off of Area 0. And then 2 Afterburner. I'm playing 2, again, 1 because I'm playing Desires. So previously when I played only 1 and I banished it, it wasn't like the end of the world, but there were situations where I would have liked it in my deck, so I'm playing a second copy. And it's bad. I think it's better than Jamming Waves, it's better than Eagle Booster. So just a +1 on activation. It hits things like Schism, forces your opponent to respond, hits things like Chuchi. Has a lot of different cards that are just really good. And then 3 Shark Cannon and 3 Widow Anchor. 3 Anchor is self-explanatory. I played 3 Shark Cannon, 1 for the Drytron matchup, and for the Mirror, and for Salamangreat. A lot of different decks revolve around the graveyard right now. And 2, because of Pot of Desires, I didn't really want to play 2 copies in case if I banished 1, in which case I only really have 1 to cycle with multi-roll again. So I felt 3 was really good. And when your opponent makes you go first games 2 and games 3, Shark Cannon is really good, consistent interruption for them that you would really like to have in your opening hand. So I played 3. That's it for the striker spells. On to regular spells, I'm playing 3 copies of Pot of Desires. I feel this card is 100% correct to play blind second. When you open Ray, you're able to dump the engage so you don't banish it off desires. And if you desires first and you banish the engage, that means that you didn't have a ray to begin with. And I'd much rather have a ray in my hand and no engage than no ray, period. So playing 3 copies of this card I feel is absolutely necessary to play in your deck. And then again, you want to play as little cards as possible in this deck just because you need to see ray as fast as possible. So being able to pot of desires to get to see 2 new cards is really, really good. So I like 3. And then as for the 1-ofs, 1 Rhoda, 1 Upstart, 1 Terraforming, 1 Mystic Mine, and 1 Mind Control. Upstart and Rhoda are self-explanatory. So 1 Terraforming is a good utility by playing the 1 Mystic Mine. I feel like this deck only really needs to play 3 Mine if that's your only win condition, and now that Engage is legal, you really don't need to rely on Mine nearly as much anymore, so it's a good utility option. A lot of decks in the game right now play back removal like Cosmic, Lightning Storm, Twin Twister, Feather Duster, so you can't really rely on this too much, but it's a good last resort bait negate if you feel like your hand's good enough to just force your opponent to respond to this. And then 1 Mind Control. I decided to play this over Talents because being able to start your turn by Mind Control targeting Appaloosa and not having to deal with your opponent trying to negate things first, I feel it's really good. And this is really good in the mirror too. Talents isn't very good in the mirror because if your opponent's smart, they're just not going to activate any hand traps in the main phase, which makes Talents kind of dead in that matchup. So the 1 Mind Control is really good in those scenarios. And that's it for the main deck, even 40 cards. On the extra deck, so we play the 11 Striker Links. In Pure, I feel like you have to play these. Zeke's a really good addition to the deck now that Engage is legal again. Being able to just rip through negates is really insane. Zeke's a force negate. Kagari's a force negate, and at that point you already used 2 negates. At that point you can just make a Shark Cannon, try and go for Hulk combo and kill your opponent that way. Speaking of Hulk combo, we're playing Hulk, Selene, and Access Code. So we're playing, as you saw previously, we're playing Effect Veiler. So Selene facilitates that by just having any monster like a Sky Striker Link plus like a Shark Cannon or a normal Summon Tuner gets you into the Hulk Fibrax, which gets you into the Selene, which gets you into a 5300 Access Code Talker. And Sky Strikers are 4 different attributes, and Selene is a light, so that's 5 pops easily. And then you can usually get a Ray out also, that's 6,800 points of damage. So at that point, you're really just looking at a Hayate poke to be able to kill your opponent that way. So you're able to reduce your opponent's life to 0 a lot faster than you previously were if you're playing this package. And the 15th card I'm playing is Ningirsu. You can play Hita and you can play Nightmare Phoenix, but I feel Ning is the best option because for the 15th card, I was trying to think what card can convert probably a loss into a win, and I felt like Ningirsu is probably the best option there. So I'm not playing Talents, I'm not playing Droplets, which means if my opponent plays something like Dragoon, I don't really have that good of an out other than Access Code Talker. And at that point, I'm using Access Code Talker not for its intended function, which is to kill your opponent, it's to attack over a monster. So Ningirsu is able to do that on its own and force out a Dragoon negate, and if he does it that way, then I can Access Code to try and kill my opponent. Or if he already used a negate earlier in the turn, I can Ningirsu then and then save this for later. So I felt like this was the best card to play as the 15th card. Onto the side deck, I played 3 Ally of Justice Cycle Reader. This deck can't really play Droll and Lockbird, because if your opponent knows what to do, they're just going to pass after you droll them, and you're kind of back where you started because you can't really kill your opponent very efficiently if they just pass there. So this card is able to completely disrupt your opponent if they're playing Drytron, and completely cripple them, so you're able to start accruing advantage again with Sky Strikers. Most players will make you go first, so being able to side this card in, going first or going second, is really helpful. And it's a tuner, which has niche applications to summon it to make Hulk Fibrax. Onto the spells, playing 3 Shared Ride, 3 Twin Twister, and 3 Cosmic Cyclone. So this is when opponents make me go first, and again, either the mirror match against Drytron, against Dragon Link, all those decks search from deck or grave to hand multiple times in a turn. And if I bring in Cycle Reader against Drytron, at that point I have 16 hand traps in my deck, which is very difficult for that opponent to kill me while I'm drawing a card every time they add. Against Dragon Link, I'm drawing 3 or 4 cards, or they'll just pass. And the difference between this card and Droll is this card replaces itself almost immediately, while Droll is a true neg1. As for Twin Twister and Cosmic, I didn't want to lose to things like Anti-Spell Fragrance and Imperial Order, so if I side cards like Lightning Storm or Harpy's Feather Duster and they have those cards, they essentially do nothing. So I wanted to play cards that out those cards immediately, because the decks that do side Anti-Spell lose to my deck naturally, so I don't want them to have a win button that I can't respond to. So this card is the best option, I feel. And then the last 3 is 3 different Dimension Grounds. This is really good against pretty much everything right now. Prankids and Drytron is essentially a dimensional barrier. Against something like Salamangrade, it's really good. Anything that's really graveyard reliant, I can just flip this and it stops my opponent's turn. The reason why I like this card over something like Summon Limit, or there can be only one, is a lot of decks are going to side backer removal for you, heavy backer removal, like Twin Twister, Lightning Storm, Cosmic Cyclone. So while I don't want to side cards that already lose to my opponent's side, I want to have a card that has good applications when they try and do that. So if my opponent Lightning Storms me or they Twin Twister me, and I have different Dimension Ground, this is the only card I'm going to set on my turn, because this is the only thing I need. So if my opponent Cosmic Cyclones me or uses Spell and Trap removal against this different Dimension Ground, not only do I essentially get value because my opponent lost a card, my opponent is effectively going to have to completely end their turn. So I like this card a lot in the tournament. It won me a lot of games. That's it for the deck profile. This deck ended phenomenally. It performed really well. Like I said, I didn't drop a match. This deck did exactly as it was intended. It would beat everything that was slower than it. And just being heads up lets you beat everything about as fast or faster than it. So it was really good. I'd like to shout out to Midwest Gaming for helping me out and sponsoring me. And thank you all.